How criminal convictions can trigger deportation. This is Christina Williams with Just Criminal Law.
And David Mann, legal storytelling specialist. All right, so this is an area that we have been lately hearing quite a bit about, deportations and criminal activity, and I think there's a lot of confusion. So let's talk, I guess, about this. So criminal convictions triggering deportation. Maybe define that first a little bit. What's a criminal conviction in this context?
Sure, it's when you plead guilty and are sentenced, or you're found guilty and are sentenced of a crime. And not all crimes are going to trigger deportation, but certain crimes will.
Okay, so what would be examples, I guess, of things that people might be worried would trigger deportation if they are in fact an immigrant, but that you're gonna tell us right now are not to worry about in this conversation that we're having?
Sure. So an example of a crime that you shouldn't worry about is if you get a DUI. So getting your standard DUI ticket is not going to trigger deportation. And, if you have multiple DUIs, then you could be in trouble. But just one first offense DUI, you're gonna be okay. That's like a general example of when you don't have to worry.
Okay, and I suppose, even lesser things that people might worry about, speeding tickets and parking tickets, none of that is what we're talking about, right?
Correct. It's none of those types of offenses that, they can accidentally happen. It's not like you're out to break the law there. I mean, who hasn't been ticketed speeding? So we're not looking for those type of common infractions, but it's more along the lines of what the courts have described as moral turpitude type of offenses. That is, they just are considered immoral, generally speaking, in society. And there's several examples of that, specifically, like if you're convicted of a violent felony, like, for example, a strangulation or pointing a gun at somebody, or a sexual assault. Those are all considered violent felonies. Another example would be if you have certain drug offenses. Certain drug offenses will trigger deportation. A family violence battery, that's a misdemeanor involving maybe a girlfriend or a spouse or a family member. That is an offense that will trigger deportation, as well as just a non-criminal act like violating a protection order. All of a sudden, the prosecutor can charge that as a crime, and that could trigger deportation as well.
So, one of the things you had on your list there was you said certain drug charges. So that's, there's a pretty wide range of that. So if someone, for instance, has a little bit of pot that they get caught with, is that the kind of thing that could trigger this deportation?
Well, we're talking about maybe multiple convictions of possessing marijuana. And certainly a conviction, involving drug trafficking. That is, if you were found guilty of possessing marijuana with the intent to distribute it. Those are types of crimes where the court would look at it as generally being immoral against, the community. And it's not just a misdemeanor pot ticket. It's, you're not only possessing marijuana, you're selling it. So that type of offense is going to suffer much harsher scrutiny than your simple misdemeanor possession ticket.
Okay. What about things like theft? I mean, there is sort of major theft and minor theft. So is there any type of theft that would be too small a crime, or is any kind of theft, would that qualify for this?
Well, under the Lincoln-Riley Act now, people are being detained immediately related to theft offenses. So that could be anything from shoplifting to, burglary. And so this area of the law is constantly changing. It's evolving. And so that's why it's so important, if you're charged with a crime and you're not a citizen, whether you're here illegally or you're here and you're documented, either way, it's very, very important to protect your criminal record. You certainly don't want to explain that the next time you want to renew your paperwork. And you certainly don't want to be arrested, detained, and then face deportation action if you're not here legally. And there's ways that you can help your case if you are undocumented, where an attorney can help you get on the right track. But a lot of times these criminal charges make it more complicated, and you definitely should not go it alone.
Okay, so if someone knows that they have been convicted of a crime in the past and they are an immigrant, whether they are documented or undocumented, it sounds like this might be a good time to reach out to an immigration lawyer. And is that something that you do?
Well, we can certainly help them. Yes, we are expanding our practice, but even before they worry about their immigration matter, they need to make sure that they get help on the criminal matter. First things first. And so we can help them navigate, once they've been charged with a crime, we can definitely help them navigate the system.
All right, so tell us how to get in touch with you.
Sure, we'll include a link in the description where they can call, text, or chat with a member of my team anytime, day or night. Here at Just Criminal Law, we know you only get one shot at justice, so make yours count.